All right, Shalom. I want to start by giving our praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who teach and rule well, and also to their elders, the men that taught them. I pray the Lord have peace, blessings, and mercy upon the households of the hopeful elect. This is the brother Shema Warren from the Great Millstone Houston Church. And today I want to come with a lesson. I was listening to the apostles today, and I heard Apostle Tahar going into how because of certain men, who were amongst the body at one point in time, they dealt with the brothers in a way of, how should I say it? They didn't deal correctly or uprightly with, the brothers that they were amongst. All right. And that brought me to 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter. Just thinking about certain points that Apostle Tahar made mention of, talking about, some of those guys that he made mention of didn't deal correctly with brothers, and the Lord took some of them out. Some of them returned back to the spiritual realm. And it made me think about 1 Corinthians 11, because the other day, me and a brother were reading through 1 Corinthians 11, and we hit certain points that the apostle spoke on. So just, through the Spirit, I just want to touch on this real quick, and I pray it'll be edifying to the Lord's elect. Because just singling in on how important it is to deal uprightly and correctly, especially amongst, the church, which, the body. And what makes that up? Our brothers, our fellow brothers, that are a part of this ministry. So it's important, according to the scriptures, on how to deal. Because like Apostle Tahar made mention, he said that's why, the Lord put some of them to death. And that's according to the scriptures. Okay, as we'll read, Lord willing. So let's start here. 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 17, and we'll read it in the NLT. And the heading it says, order at the Lord's Supper. But focusing in on the point of how we deal amongst our brethren, especially whenever, we fellowship, especially whenever we're able to, spend time with one another. Okay. So with that being said, let's get into it. 1 Corinthians 11 and 17 in the NLT. It says, but in the following instructions, I cannot praise you, for it sounds as if more harm than good is done when you meet together. And this is a letter to the church of Corinth. And this can still apply to us till this very day. The scriptures tell you the things written aforetime before our learning. And this is one of them instances that can apply at all times. Just being mindful of how we deal amongst, the body or the church or the brothers that the Lord gave a portion of his spirit to. Okay, we're not dealing with just no ordinary individual. All right, the Lord called us, into something different. Okay, and looking at the next man beside you, just as that. All right. Not praising a man, but looking at it, from that standpoint, it's like, brother, Lord got this man in here. He could be a part of the Lord's elect. He could be a vessel the Lord actually cares about, But it says, verse 2, verse 17, 1 Corinthians 11 and 17 again in the NLT. But in the following instructions, I cannot praise you, for it sounds as if more harm than good is done when you meet together. First, I hear that there are divisions among you when you meet as a church, and to some extent, I believe it. And, just thinking about how it applies to this day, that's like the apostles, having something to say about, a certain camp. The things we read about literally are still in effect to this very day. We're living it. We don't have to just read about it. We actually live it out. And in this context, there's certain things to pay attention to, because the Lord is not playing around when it comes to his church or his body or the assembly of brothers, who are in this ministry. It says, first I hear that there are divisions among you when you meet as a church, and to some extent, I believe it. Matter of fact, real quick, let me get my Bible. Because in the next chapter, Apostle Paul makes mention how there shouldn't be no divisions or schisms amongst the body. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let me go to my Bible. 1 Corinthians 12 in verse 25, it says, let's see. Yeah, I'll just start there. 1 Corinthians 12 and 25, it says that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. And mind you, the context is amongst the body, how we deal with our brothers. Okay? So it said, but all members should have the same care one for another. Not just out here reading the Bible and breaking scriptures down and prophesying. No, it's actually, a certain way we deal with one another. And I see it personally, being blessed with being a part of the Houston church. I see it. We live this. And a lot of people don't understand that. And guess what? Nobody's here to pull your arm and leg to get you to see it. This is something that the Lord brought us into. This ain't of our own. That's why, acknowledging it as it should be is very important. Okay, the Lord got this thing going on, not us. But going back to 1 Corinthians 11 and 17, in verse 19, it says, but I'll read 18 again. It says, first, I hear that there are divisions among you when you meet as a church, and to some extent, I believe it. But of course, there must be divisions among you so that you who have the Most High's approval will be recognized. And that's what and that's exactly what happens. If a brother ain't in the right spirit, the Lord is gonna do the sifting, and it will be acknowledged. It will be exposed. And now you got a brother who is gonna get dealt with, and so on and so forth. But it says, but of course there must be division, so it's gonna be present. There's gonna be divisions among you. Why? So that you who have the Most High's approval will be recognized. And that's what's going to happen at the end of the day. The Lord is going to reveal who is really in this thing and serious and who's not. Verse 20, it says, when you meet together, you are not really interested in the Lord's Supper. And going back to the context in verse 17, how it says, talking about, when you meet together. So going back to fellowshipping or meeting together, being amongst the body, the brothers, right? So it says, when you meet together, you are not really interested in the Lord's Supper. So you're there, but you're not really in it, so to speak. Physically being there, but spiritually or mentally not being in the game. It says, for some of you hurry to eat your own meal without sharing with others. As a result, some go hungry while others get drunk. They're just for the food or just for the drink, whatever it may be. That's not really being there. Just like in the scriptures, you had a lot of people following Yahushua. Okay? But for what? To really hear the message and to get edified, or just to eat some fish and bread? Nothing is new. Nothing is different. But this is something to pay attention to that we can read in the scriptures. All right. It says, for some of you hurry to eat your own meal without sharing with others. And that's something that we're taught. Don't be quick to just fucking eat without thinking about serving. That's something I learned heavy, amongst this church. Learn to serve. And even, the elders from Dallas coming out here pushing the same energy, same spirit. Learn to serve. Be the best servant you could be. All right. But it says, as a result, some who? The brothers. Some of your beloved brethren go hungry while others get drunk. Some men really do need that meal, but you on your second plate. And you lit and you feel good and type shit. Just certain things to pay attention to and certain things you hear from the past. Because this ain't, no fucking Disney fairy tale story like everything is going to be perfect. That's why we have the scriptures to go back to and to get edified on. All right? Because these things have always happened. There's nothing new. It says, as a result, some go hungry while others get drunk. Verse 22, what? Don't you have your own homes for eating and drinking? You could have just stayed at the crib and did that. Because it said you're really not interested in the Lord's Supper. You're not here on the Lord's business. You here for a damn a meal and a nice drink. And like I said, or the intent ain't pointing out nobody. It's just in general, just reading the scriptures. Because these things happened in the past and they happen in the days we're in now. Or do you really want to disgrace the Most High's church and shame the poor? What am I supposed to say? Do you want me to praise you? Well, I certainly will not praise you for this, because that's a problem. It shouldn't be like that. Okay? Being mindful and courteous of your brothers, those amongst the body and church, men that the Lord is dealing with. Verse 23 says, for I pass on to you what I received from the Lord himself. And thinking about it too, Apostle Paul got dealt with by the Lord. A lot of people say, well, the Lord got to show me, or the Lord got to teach me. No, this is different. The Lord even said he was going to be a chosen vessel. Okay, so you can't use, well, the Lord is going to send an unction where we're going to know all things. No, that's not what it's talking about. It's not what it's talking about. That's out of context. The Lord actually dealt with Apostle Paul. Okay, the Lord himself even said you cannot kick against the pricks. He called him out. He was going to be a chosen vessel unto the Lord. So he dealt with him. He dealt with Apostle Paul differently. So reading on, it says, on the night when he was betrayed, the Lord Yahushua took some bread and gave thanks to the Most High for it. Then he broke it in pieces and said, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, he took a cup of wine after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant between the Most High and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood. Do this in remembrance of me as often as you drink it. In the context of it is how we come together whenever we fellowship, because thinking about it, this is all in the name of the Lord. This is all in remembrance of the Lord's sake. So having a problem, having divisions, not dealing correctly with your brothers is a fucking problem. And this is just strictly from what we read, because this is all supposed to be in remembrance of Yahushua. Okay? Just being mindful. Verse 26, it says, for every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, you are announcing the Lord's death until he comes. So showing you what, whose name it's in. This is in the name of the Lord. Coming together, fellowshipping, especially at the Lord's Supper. Can't be no isms and schisms, amongst the church, which, the brothers make it up, the body. Okay? And just thinking about, other lessons that go out, Elder Yashawamba was speaking on that the other day, going into Isaiah 51, that lesson that was done, but hitting certain points like how to deal amongst the brothers, caring for one another, treating brothers' belongings, properly, not just moving a certain way, but actually paying attention to in the way of actually caring, to the point you use a brother restroom, you ain't finna just leave shit any type of way, acknowledging who it is that we're actually amongst. But this was something that stuck out because Apostle Tahar made mention that, some brothers from the past, the Lord put to death because how they dealt. And as we'll keep reading, we'll see. But verse 27, it says, so anyone who eats this bread and drinks this cup of the Most High unworthily is guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord, and understanding the body of the Lord is what? The church. We make up the body of the Lord. And if you don't come correctly, you double offending. You offending the body and literally, what Yahweh Shah did, what's behind his sacrifice. This is one of these readings that, that stood out to me like, oh shit, bro, the Lord is not fucking playing around with this. And already knowing that, but seeing it, the Lord is not playing when it comes to his body. Okay? We talking about a remnant out of everybody on the earth that has a chance of salvation. The Lord is not fucking playing. And we can possibly be a part of that. How so? If we deal correctly. The Lord is telling us certain things that, he put the spirit on Apostle Paul to say, I'm not pleased with this. Because look at how the body of the Lord is acting. The visions, certain brothers acting like, just looking out for themselves, not being mindful of other brothers' situations. Certain things like that. Then coming together in the name of the Lord, but you still got to fucking ought with a brother? No, sir. The Lord does not approve of shit like that. Then it says, verse 28, this is why you should examine yourself before eating the bread and drinking the cup. So before even going fellowshipping with brothers, honoring the Lord's, supper, if you ain't in the right spirit, it's best to not even fucking go. Because verse 30, it says, now let's read verse 29 through. It says, for if you eat the bread and drink the cup without honoring the body of Hamashiach, you are eating and drinking the Most High's judgment unto yourself. So if you don't honor the body, which is what? How is that displayed in today's time? The church, the brothers, if you don't honor the brothers that the Lord has, gathered together, you looking at a man like, I don't even know why he here type shit. And just saying that as I read, because the Lord works out things, so different sometimes, because you do have certain men that might not be, how should I say it? Like according to the scriptures, some men that crept in unaware, but just sticking on the point of, focusing on being the best brother that you could be. Okay, being in the right spirit, being in the spirit that's not displeasing or that's not disapproved of the Lord. Okay? So it says, so because of that, if you eat the bread and drink of the Lord's cup, without honoring the body of a Mashiach, you're eating and drinking the Lord's judgment unto yourself, meaning you're going to get punished for that. You can't come incorrectly or use the Lord with ill intentions and think you're going to get away with it. No. It says, verse 30, it says, that is why many of you are weak and sick, and some have even died. And that's what I really thought about whenever I heard Apostle Tahar going back to what he said. How certain brothers dealt with other brothers in the truth. Say, see, that's why the Lord took some of them out. So much to the point where we just read it, based off how you deal amongst the body, and even considering, because you're really doing this to the Lord, okay? Because this is all in the name of the Lord. We're only here because of who? Yahweh Shah. All right, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. So not being in the correct spirit or coming the correct way, but you got ulterior motives or the wrong spirit. It says you're gonna eat and drink the Lord's judgment upon yourself. And verse 30 tells you what the Lord can do to you. It says that is why many of you are weak and sick, and some even die. So that's the cause and effect. There's something to be mindful of. That's why it's like, bro, understanding these scriptures, you're gonna fear the Lord. You're going to fear the Lord because he is not playing. He's not playing with his body. He's not playing with his. Verse 30. No, verse 30. Yeah, verse 30. It says, that is why many of you are weak and sick, and some of you have even died. Verse 31, but if we would examine ourselves, we would not be judged by the Most High in this way. Yet when we are judged by the Lord, we are being disciplined so that we will not be condemned along with the world. So put it like this: if something bad does happen to a brother, that don't mean like, see, he came in a wrong spirit or he ain't dealing correctly. No, it could be the fact the Lord is just disciplining you so we won't be condemned with the world. Okay? But just hitting that point, it made me think like, hey man, it's important to deal with the body correctly. Okay? Talking about what makes the body up today. Not talking about the Lord's literal body. No, the men that the Lord gathered together and gave a portion of his spirit to do this ministry, to do this work, this service. But yeah, I just wanted to get that while it was on my spirit. So I ended there. I pray this was edifying to the Lord's elect. And Lord willing, to the next time I say shalom.